Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. With me today is Jonathan Bratten, currently serving as an officer in the Army National Guard in the Pine Tree State, which is the state of Maine. Jonathan is joining us today to discuss his book, To the Last Man, the National Guard Regiment in the Great War, 1917 through 1919. You may have heard Jonathan speaking about this very same book on the Western Front Association's Mentioned in Dispatches podcast, but we're making this different by focusing on the discussed unit's time in the Meuse-Argonne campaign of the U.S. Army. Mentioned in Dispatches is an excellent podcast, by the way, and everybody should check it out. So the regiment in question is the U.S. 103rd Infantry Regiment, and it belonged to the 26th Yankee Division. We'll be talking about the 103rd and the 26th performance in the last weeks of World War I today, and I'm super excited to get into it. A quick search of Jonathan on the web, and that might come off as kind of creepy, but I promise you it was not, turned up mainly this for a short bio. On his Twitter page, we have, quote, usually wandering off to look at old stuff. Tweets do not reflect opinion of DOD. So that last bit is excellent, as it's a great way to get that disclaimer out. Nothing in this podcast episode reflects the opinions of the U.S. Department of Defense, nor of any other U.S. military agency. The shortness of the bio is excellent too, because it allows me to ask Jonathan to tell us more about himself. So here we go. Jonathan, thank you so very much for taking the time to come on the podcast. Please tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on. First off, I'm really excited to be here. Anytime someone asks me to talk about World War I, that's very exciting. It means that I don't have to force that upon them against their will.
Right.
No, this is great. A little bit about me. Oh gosh. I don't know. I don't think of myself as sort of a World War I historian. That's I guess I am now. So which is strange. I grew up in Ohio, just utterly fascinated by the Civil War of all conflicts. Moved up to Maine about 16 years ago, something like that. Was part of the Maine National Guard, and and I've been very lucky to have a great job as an Army historian. It's sort of one of the best kept secrets out there is that the Army does employ, actually every federal agency employs historians, lots of historians. So it's really cool to be able to do all of this inside that system, and it's led me to all sorts of amazing places and given me great opportunities. And, a lot of those opportunities sort of put together caused me to be like, I should probably write something about that.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. So I was telling the missus earlier that I might ask you this question, but since you're now working as a historian in the military and the National Guard, I assume you have a branch of the Army that you've been assigned to, and I wanted to ask you what branch are you a part of, and if it's not armor, why is it not armor?
Oh, that's a great question. So I am an engineer officer, and I'm not an armor officer because New England National Guard divested its last armor in 2006, I think, when Vermont got rid of its armor. Maine got rid of its armor in 1967, so I missed that by about 50 years or so. If we had armor, there's a very, very good chance that I would be an armor officer, but no, I'm an engineer officer, which is great because I get to work with, engineers being generalists, we work with everybody.
Of course.
So I've gotten to work with lots of different units, heavy and light. Actually started out as an enlisted infantryman in Ohio, and we were in a mech unit. So,
wow.
Rolled around and that was, enlisted in that. So rolling around in Bradleys and looking at the tankers and being like, wow, those are so cool.
They were super cool.
Yeah. They're okay, I guess. The first time I heard an Abrams start, I was like, who just fired up a jet engine? Like, where is that? Oh, there it is.
Yeah. This is probably a good point where I should tell you, like in the motor pool, like that's where you could find me would be like around the back, like standing in the exhaust, staying warm, generally
inhaling it.
Well, awesome. Absolutely. I mean, of course, like the military gives you wide range of experiences, and you're allowed to given these opportunities to work with everybody. It's very, very cool. So to get back to the Great War, what sparked your interest in the Great War? I think you already alluded a bit, like you're from Ohio, you're mainly interested in the Civil War. So what got you really focused into the Great War, and then specifically on the 103rd Infantry Regiment?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of all started. I always like to say, like, I never set out to write a book on World War One. Like, I actually, my plan was to write, something on Mainers in the Civil War. Preferably the ones who are not on Little Round Top, because there were a bunch of others who did really cool things.
Right.
But it turns out, there's a lot of people already doing that writing, and they write really well, and they're good historians, so that's good stuff. But it was actually more, I knew nothing. I knew pretty much next to nothing about the U.S. participation in World War I when I started my job back in 2014 as the command historian for the Maine National Guard. And I was just sort of like poking around and looking at files, and I was like, man, there's a lot of stuff here on like our infantry regiment's participation in the World War, and that had personal ties to me because the engineer battalion that I'm a part of, the 133rd Engineer Battalion, they're directly descended from the 103rd Infantry Regiment. Okay. So, you'd have ceremonies or something. You look at the streamers, and you'd be like, oh, what's this Marne thing? What's the Meuse-Argonne? And of course, at the time, I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce any of this because my French is terrible. I'm like, the Marne, right? Like all this stuff, and people, and then also it was really embarrassing when people would be like, "Hey, why do we have these streamers on our colors? Like, what are these for?" I'm like, I don't, for war stuff, I guess. We did some war stuff. So I started just like digging a little bit, and like I knew the unit had been involved in World War One. I knew it had seen some combat, and then I was like, "Whoa, these guys not only saw some combat, like they saw a lot of combat. In fact, like they were some of the very, very first U.S. combat troops who were over there and participating in an active front." And so it's sort of just, I guess where like the bug sort of bit me, and it was very like subtle, like, and it just sort of began to grow as like I grew, as I got more used to my job, and as I started developing relationships around the state. And then you start to meet people, and they say, oh, hey, I've got my great grandfather's such and such, or here's my grandfather's diary, or we just found this thing, would you like to read it? It's from, all this stuff from World War I. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, it's beginning to add up. Like, I think there's something here, and it was just like, they were fascinating stories, really, really cool stories. I'm like, okay, I want to know more. And so like, you start getting addicted. It is like an addiction. I would say it's a cheap addiction, but we all know it's not, because it brings you over to France and you end up buying all sorts of things and helmets and bayonets and bidding on things on eBay at 2 a.m. and other great life choices like that.
Yep.
So to sort of get back to your question, it was symbiotic. I guess the interest was sparked by the 103rd. And then I started to get really interested in World War I, as I don't want to say I dismissed it. I was just like, oh, we were only in it for like 18 months, and it was all really stupid anyway. Lions led by donkeys. There was no point, all those things. And then I started digging. I'm like, oh no, this is like super nuanced and subtle and really interesting. And there's a whole bunch of really great lessons learned in here. And gosh, we should really study this more. Maybe we would make better decisions. So yeah, it sort of came about that the interests collided together, and I sort of haven't looked back since.
Just touching back on the lessons learned, I frequently find myself reading about the AEF, and then I find myself thinking like of my own time in the service, and it's like we would never allow that. We would never not like we never went out and didn't know the mission. We didn't know the objective. We never attacked like without maps. We never attacked without an objective, and I have those thoughts, and then I'm like, well, yeah, because these guys had to learn the lessons the hard way, and these are the lessons that we started to take from the AEF of like, yeah, everyone from lieutenant colonel to private needs to know what the mission is, so that they can carry it on at, no matter who's left. So
and that's why this era is like it is. I remember back during the centennial, the head of the director of the Army Center Military History said, he's like, why is World War I important? It is the birth of the modern Army. And it is, because what's crazy is you can, you look at like 20 years prior to 1917, look at where the National Guard and the Army were. They looked like the Army of 1865.
Right.
I mean, like they were literally using crap from 18, like I was reading a report on like it was like a Army engineer report for the Spanish-American War that was just like, was looking at all these engineer assets. All the pontoon bridges we had were from the Civil War.
Wow.
So like you could take a soldier from now and throw them into a U.S. Army formation in like 1914 or so, and they'd be kind of like, what's going on here? Like, I'm not really sure about this. Throw them in one in 1918, they'd be like, oh, I get it. Yep. Okay. Like, I understand, like, here's a platoon, here's squads. Like I get combined arms. Yeah, that guy's got a, automatic rifle. Those guys have grenade launchers. Oh, you guys like doing some combined arms, like fire team sort of thing? Like, And so I just like, it's like this crazy thing that happens where in 1917, the Army jumps from like 1865 into the modern era in a matter of a few months. Right. And that's wild. That is what, like, I keep trying to like think about what that would look like today, whether it's like, hey, remember like all those units and doctrine and equipment and weapons and tactics and literally everything that we did for the past like 50 years? Gone. Here's a whole bunch of new stuff. Learn it. Bye. Have a nice trip to France.
Right. Or I guess the only thing I could think of would be like if suddenly I don't know, we suddenly find ourselves fighting in space, using all the equipment and stuff like that. I can't even think about like what kind of rapid change we would have to see to understand. So getting into the 103rd specifically, what is the story of the regiment's formation and its attachment to the 26th Division back in 1917? You said that now it's the 133rd Engineer Battalion. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So the force structure piece is a thing that we do a lot of as National Guard historians, as we trace units, lineages. And so the 103rd Infantry prior to 1917 existed as the 2nd Maine Infantry Regiment. So it was Maine's only infantry regiment in 1917, and it goes back to really the formation of the units back in the 1850s. A bunch of the companies were some of the original militia companies that formed part of the 2nd Maine Infantry in the Civil War. So if anyone's who's watched the movie Gettysburg, they were the guys who were mutineers. Basically, they were the ones who were like, no, we're. Yeah, I know you said, well, we signed up for 3 years, but thing is, our recruiters lied to us. So yeah, it goes back to that long history in the state. But what happened? We talk about things that have to change for modern war. So. The 2nd Maine gets recruited up to wartime strength in the spring of 1917. And that's about 2,000 troops. Now, the Army's table of organization for infantry regiments goes from, like 2,000 troops to 3,800, which is insane. The span of control that you think about for that. And so as they start putting together these new divisions, New England becomes the formation spot for the 26th Division, otherwise known as the Yankee Division. And so they just start like cutting units up and mashing up units and like taking bits. It's like Frankenstein's monster. Like, oh, I'll take a little bit of this. Like, hey, I'm going to take like 400 dudes from the 1st Vermont, throw them in here, and we'll take. So like they take all the enlisted men of the 1st New Hampshire, throw them in. Some elements of the 6th and 8th Massachusetts, throw them in. And they're like, oh, congratulations! Now you're all one unit, and you're the 103rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. And everyone's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Like, you've literally changed the entire organization and structure. And that was going on across the entire U.S. at the time, of course, for all the National Guard units. It was kind of a traumatic time where you have units that had really long, proud state identities suddenly being like, hey, here's your new identity. Get along. Go to war. Have fun.
And is this slightly off topic, but is this the end of units, being named with like state designations?
Yeah, it goes on. Like, I think the last one, there's some units that hang on into the 20s.
Okay.
So like, for example, when they federalized the 2nd Maine in 1917, the Maine National Guard's like, well, we kind of have no troops here, because the rest of the National Guard in Maine was Coast Artillery, and of course they were mobilized as well. Right. And like, we kind of have no National Guard here in case something happens. So they raised it. They were given authorization by the War Department to raise the 3rd Maine Infantry. And they're the only existing organization in the National Guard, like through 1919, 1920, 1921, until the Guard begins to reconstitute. And they stay the 3rd Maine, and I want to say until 1921. And it's super bizarre because, it's very rare that you actually get a unit that keeps its state designation. But by and large, 1917 is when all the state designations go away. Everything becomes federal nomenclature.
Oh, okay. All right. So who was the commander of the 103rd, and can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah. Oh, man, he was a funny guy. Colonel Frank Hume, who was from Bridgewater, Maine, which is way up there. It is like, you drive past Bangor and just keep going, and then you basically get to the border with Canada and bang a left. Like,
oh, wow. Okay.
And then keep driving.
Wow, that's deep.
So he's a Northern Mainer, really interesting dude. He had aspirations to go to West Point, but scarlet fever left him with horrible eyesight. So he ended up going to it was like this military prep school in Poughkeepsie, or near Poughkeepsie, New York, and then came back to Maine and finished his degree there. But he always just had this like lifelong dream of being a soldier. Like, apparently as a kid, he would form his friends into like, a little military company and march them around. So, which is basically what he does as an adult. He becomes a postmaster of Holton, Maine, which is also Northern Maine. And he organizes a company, like, 40, 45 dudes. And basically, at the time, what you did is, if you wanted to be part of the National, if you wanted a new unit in the National Guard, you would essentially organize a company, present it to the state, and be like, hey, look, we have a company. I would love to know what that looks like, by the way. Like, I would love to know, like, did anyone ask for this?
Yeah. Seriously.
But he organized the Holton Company. They presented to the state. It was accepted and became Company L of the 2nd Maine. So he was, and because he had organized the company, he was the company commander. It's like, again, when we're talking about like, this is stuff that you would think of from the Civil War. This is happening in the 1890s. Like, this, it hasn't changed at all. So through this whole era, you're watching like everything changes inside the Guard. So he rises up through the ranks. He goes to Cuba as a company commander in a unit from Maine. They miss all the fighting. They're there for occupation duty, but still, when are you going to go from Maine, like Northern Maine, to Cuba? Like, what I mean? That's kind of a big deal. And probably a bunch of those guys are like, well, this is the most interesting thing I'll ever do. Came back. He rises up through the ranks. I believe he was a battalion commander by 1904, which is when they went to Manassas, Virginia for maneuvers. The Army was trying out this new thing of, hey, what if we take all of our like regulars in National Guard and actually put them through live training scenarios, kind of like a NTC or JRTC. These are all precursors to that. So they came down and trained in Manassas. So he was building up more and more experience. And then by 1916, he's the colonel of the regiment, and he takes them to the border during the 1916 call up of the National Guard that saw, what was it, like 240,000? Yeah, no, 140,000 Guard troops all mobilized down on the border for about 6 months or so. So he's gaining all of this military experience, but dude's still a postmaster. Like he looks like a postmaster. Like when you look at him, you're like, oh, he should be a postmaster, because he is. He doesn't look like a combat leader. His main traits were profanity. He had a sign above his office desk that said, please no swearing. It's not that we give a damn, but it sounds like hell to the customers. And then also he never forgot a soldier's name. There were like accounts of him running into people in Maine, like in the 1930s and 40s, who he'd served with in Cuba, like in 1898, 99, and he remembered their names. So that type of thing obviously endears soldiers to someone. And he was, by and large, it seemed like he was a very competent administrative leader, and his men really, really liked him. And he cared for them. He really looked out for their welfare.
Awesome. So you got Colonel Hume, the 103rd. They're merged as part of they're formed as part of the 26th Division with the 101st, 102nd, 104th Infantry. Also the 101st Field Artillery and other units. I can't remember all of them in there now. So the 26th Division, I think I know this story. So when did the 26th deploy for overseas duty? Because I understand like their commander was also a bit of a character.
Very much so.
And the conditions under which they deployed, again, is one of those things like that just simply wouldn't be allowed.
Right. Yeah, so the 26th Division gets formed formally in August of 1917. And so all these units, I guess you mentioned them, you've got the 4 infantry regiments, you've got 3 field artillery regiments, you've got an engineer regiment, sanitary train, ammunition train, 3 field ambulance companies, 3 field hospitals, 3 machine gun battalions. There's a lot. These are enormous organizations. This is 28,000 people in a division.
Right.
For reference, of course, the British, French, and German divisions are around 14 to 15,000. So these are just monsters, and nobody has ever had any experience doing anything with anything this large. Like it's crazy. So the 26th Division's commander is Major General Clarence Edwards, who's a really interesting dude. He's a West Pointer. Originally from Ohio, go Buckeyes, and he follows sort of a he's contemporaries with all the with Pershing and Liggett and like all these guys who are going to form the AAF. Mm-hmm. But he's also very good friends with President Taft, and so because of that, he gets some interesting assignments. Like he commands I think his last command before he took command of the 26th Division was commanding the Panama Canal Zone. So he didn't have a lot of like operational field experience like Pershing did or others like that. He tended to have what some might call sort of like perk assignments or cushy assignments.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that he didn't know what he was doing. One thing that he hadn't done was get to Cuba in time to participate in fighting during the Spanish-American War in 1898. So he kind of had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Let me rephrase that. He had a massive chip on his shoulder. He had a huge authority problem. but like Hume, his men loved him. He was super personable. He looked out for their best interest. He was just the right, like when you have that leader who you're like, yeah, all right, they're unorthodox, but like, damn, I trust them, and
Right.
they're going to go to bat for me, and they're looking out for me.
Right.
So with all of this, so the division concentrates for the first time at a couple different training camps in Massachusetts in August, September of 1917. And I say concentrates, I mean, they're not even together completely as an entire division, really, until France. The plan was that they were supposed to go to Camp Green, North Carolina, to do their training, to concentrate as a division and to train on all this new stuff that we were talking about, like all this new technology and equipment and tactics. That wasn't really in General Edwards' schedule that day, I guess. So he got this idea that he wanted to get his division over to France first. Now, the War Department had thought about this, obviously. They thought about, like, in all our past wars, the states are always fighting against each other. Like Pennsylvania and Massachusetts and New York are like always duking it out over like who's better and like who got where first. And so they tried to get around that by creating the 42nd Division, which was a National Guard division.
Right.
Called the Rainbow Division. Brought in units from all across the nation to be like, okay, this is actually going to be the first National Guard unit to go to France, so that we don't have to deal with such and such, Pennsylvania, say, going and setting up a giant monument to itself like it likes to do anywhere Pennsylvania goes. So that was the plan. And then Clarence Edwards got involved, and he was like, I don't want to go to Camp Green, North Carolina. I want to go to France. So he sent his aides to all the ports of embarkation on the northeastern coast. When I say all, I mean like even to Halifax, like from Halifax all the way down to Hoboken. And is like, hey, you guys got any ships? Like, I've got some troops, your ships, my troops, they should meet. But literally, I mean, he sends his guys down there like with manifests. And they're like, so we're ready to go. And the guys in like the harbor, wow, I'm blanking. I don't want to say harbor master, but like the guys overseeing the loading of the ships. Like, no, these transports are reserved for the 42nd Division. And they're like, well, is the 42nd Division here? No, they weren't. It's like, all right, I guess, why not? Like, I can't even imagine the drug deals that were going on to make this thing happen.
Right.
And so all of a sudden in September, all the camps just like vanish in Massachusetts. And everyone's on trains headed to Hoboken and New York and Halifax. I think a battalion or two goes through Halifax. Like all these major seaports. Wow. They load up. They rendezvous in Halifax, pick up their destroyer escorts, and leave for France. And like as they're leaving, Edward sends a telegraph back to the War Department. It's basically like, "Hey, so 26th Division's on its way to France." Which, if you know anything about Pershing, he's noted for his calm and kind and patient demeanor. I can only imagine like the sound of the explosion that his brain made when he got that message. So it did a few things. It one, you have the first full division in France becomes a National Guard division, which the National Guard is always going to brag about.
Right.
And of course, it's a New England division, so everyone in New England is going to brag about that. It also means that Edwards has pissed off his boss pretty badly. They already didn't have great relationships from the academy. Honestly, all the squabbling inside the AAF of senior officers, I'm pretty sure most of it can just be put down to like they didn't like each other when they were cadets.
Wow.
Like
so I know Pershing was just the terror at West Point. He was the president of his class for all 4 years. But oh my goodness, like he was definitely like a fan of hazing as loud back in the day. And like, wow, man.
And like so when you look at, and this is a total tangent, but when you start to like, one of my favorite things to look at is like the officer corps inside the AAF. And there's a whole bunch that's done about this, and I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, because it comes up in the Meuse-Argonne. But relief of officers, and a lot of it seems to be surrounding, oh, it's a National Guard thing. I'm like, but this doesn't make sense, because like nearly every single Guard division is commanded by West Pointers, and in fact, most brigade commanders are West Pointers, and in fact, a bunch of battalion commanders and regimental commanders are West Pointers. And so I'm like, okay, this doesn't really track. And so I start like looking around at like the political machinations of officers in the AAF. And I'm like, oh my God, these are just regulars who are jockeying for like greater position in the Army after the war. They're looking at their careers, or they just didn't like each other when they were cadets and they're taking it out at each other. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is like kindergarten. You're in a freaking war, in World War One. So anyway, but the big thing that it does is it means the 26th Division gets over there in October of 1917 and has not completed any training. And so as some of the first troops in France, there's no like ready-made barracks for them. There's no training areas, so they have to build their barracks.
Right. Wow.
They build all their cantonment areas. They have to find supplies. Basically, they're just sort of foraging for the first few weeks. They have to wait on their equipment to arrive, beg, borrow, and or steal it. And then they have to build their own training area. Like they literally go out and they build an entire trench section in the fall, winter of 1718 that they then train in. So it puts the 26th Division in a pretty awkward spot, because not only are they now sort of behind the power curve when it comes to training for this new type of war, they've also ticked off their boss. And it's really hard to train for war when you've got like half of your forwards building barracks and packing up supplies. Like, the supply and support infrastructure had not yet arrived to France. So they're just like going in blind, like, Leroy Jenkinsing it.
Nice reference. That's awesome. How does Edwards survive this? Like, obviously, like some strong political connections that not even Pershing could break.
Well, I mean, he doesn't. As we'll talk about it, it's a near run thing. I mean, he survives because he was friends with Taft. He has a lot the New England governors and senators, very powerful. So Pershing's like, I don't really want to pick a fight with. I don't need that battle right now. Even though he wanted to fire him right off. There were actually a bunch of the other AAF officers who were like, we can point to things that you've done in your career that are just as stupid. So like, maybe give this guy a chance. Like, his men really, really love him. So don't break a division before it even gets into combat.
Wow. Interesting. That's not interesting. That's actually fascinating. Wow. So 26th Division with the 103rd there as well. Of course, like, they're now in France. So before they get to the Meuse-Argonne offensive in October of 1918, they're there in 1917. So the 103rd and its parent division, they see active duty on the Chemin des Dames sector, the Toul sector near Saint-Mihiel, where you have villages like Apremont, Seychapres, Chivray, where several raids. We covered Seychapres in the podcast about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, nice.
But we've got the 103rd also sees service during the Second Battle of the Marne in July of 1918. And then, of course, the clearing of the Saint-Mihiel salient the following September. So what did the 103rd learn in the field in those engagements? Like, how much did General Pershing's open warfare concept square with the reality of combat on the Western Front in 1918?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they're busy. They get, they go into line in February 6th. The first units begin occupying a frontline sector in the Chemin des Dames, and they're only break for the whole division, because they rotate units in and out of your frontline sectors, but the only break that the whole division gets is about 2.5 weeks in August. That's the only break until their armistice. Other than that, they are fully employed as frontline troops. So all of their experience until July 18th is in the defense, is fighting defensively. So that's its own specific type of warfare. Surviving trench warfare is not a passive thing. So they learn that you have to have active patrolling all the time. You always have to be sending out patrols, getting intelligence from the enemy, trying to keep them off balance. Rotating your units in and out of frontline sectors, maintaining trenches, work parties to restore wire, build trenches. All these things. There's all this whole rotation that you get used to of holding a defensive sector, and they get really, really good at it. You mentioned Zivre. That's they kick some of the best German troops in the teeth pretty blatantly. I mean, as the German AAR says, which is basically like, we've once again underestimated the fighting abilities of the Americans on the Western Front. So they get pretty good at this. There's a huge difference, though, especially in any type of warfare. The transition from defense to offense is one of the most difficult and dangerous transitions to make. Of course, the doctrine of the U.S. Army today is we only assume the defense to retake the offense, and that's we get that kind of from World War I. We're holding the defense in order to seize the initiative. So while they had a lot of frontline experience, none of it was in making fighting in open warfare. This concept of Pershing's that we are going to, take the fighting out of the trenches. It's, it calls it open warfare. It's maneuver warfare. Right. But maneuver warfare without proper combined arms, as we know it today, armor, infantry, artillery, aviation, all working in close coordination with enablers like engineers, signal. I suppose there's a few other lesser branches out there now, and all backed up by logistics. Unless you're fighting that way, as soon as you leave the trenches, you're just targets. And this is something that every single AEF division has to discover on its own in 1918. And so the 26th is no different. The first offensive, so July 18th begins the Second Marne, and the 26th Division is holding an area around Belleau Wood. They took over from the 2nd Division around July 4th to 8th. So they've already been there for like 2 weeks, just soaking up a bunch of artillery and high explosive and gas shells. And so it's time to assume the offensive, and they're going into basically just walls of machine guns. There's inadequate artillery preparation because of this idea of, we're going to take them by surprise. That works sometimes. It worked for the 3rd Battalion when they took Torcy on the morning of July 18th. But when the 2nd Battalion tried to basically take it's basically a position between two other units just to keep liaison. I mean, they weren't actually holding any type of attacking to hold any specific type of terrain. They discovered what happens when you don't just utterly pound the crap out of your enemy with artillery. Artillery liaison on the move was very, very difficult. And so units start taking a lot of casualties because they're doing open field rushes against machine guns, which, as everybody in 1914 and 1915 figured out, is a really bad idea. That's why we don't do that anymore. We have this thing called infiltration tactics, and also using a lot of artillery, which is something that the AEF is not used to. Liaison with adjacent units, liaison with artillery, liaison in general just goes to hell as soon as you begin the offensive. Phone lines get cut. Everything gets resorted to runners. There's so many Distinguished Service Cross citations for runners because, it was, kind of like a death sentence.
Right.
So they're experiencing all these same things, and it's horrible. I mean, the 103rd takes the most casualties of any unit in the 26th Division during the Second Marne, that week of combat. They just get ate up. It is a meat grinder. Yeah, granted, they pushed the Germans back 9 miles, but it's messy, it's uncoordinated. Literally, the only reason that they're able to do that is through significant bravery of specific individuals. A lot of Medal of Honor DSC citations. And again, when you were handing out a Medal of Honor citation, it's not because everything went great. It's because everything broke down. It's literally just so everything broke down, but you who may or may not still be alive, did something that materially contributed to us having success in spite of everything not working.
Right. In spite of everything else. Correct.
Right. So it was a bloodbath, simply put. Which the 26th Division recognized immediately. So in his after action review, Edwards and his subordinate officers, when they sent back up to GHQ, was, hey, this attacking out in the open thing is a very, very bad idea. If we're going to do this, there needs to be massive artillery preparation. We need armor or something. They're like, give us tanks, give us armored cars, give us literally anything. We need to improve the coordination between infantry and artillery, because when you're on the advance, artillery is not going to shoot if they think they're going to hit their own troops. And when you're in that type of mobile combat, it's really, really hard to figure out what your front line of troops is when all you've got is runners and field telephones that keep getting broken because the Germans are hitting you with high explosive and cutting all your wires.
Right.
Or, your infantry is like, oh, I could use this phone line to tie up a thing. So yeah, it's really, really messy. The AEF still doesn't understand it. So during the battle, in fact, there was a point where the Corps commander orders 2 brigades of the 26th Division to switch fronts in the middle of an attack, which was just chaos. I mean, all the regiments of the unit just got all mixed up together.
Right. I remember reading that, and I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's ever in the U.S. Army, nobody in command in the AEF at this time has ever had any type of experience moving troops like this. So when you look at a map, it's all really easy. When you've got 15,000 troops all smushed into one area, and just we'll just push that brigade. If that brigade's stronger, have them attack here and have you attack there, and so it causes chaos. And then you've got Pershing's representatives coming down and asking Edwards, where's your front line of troops? And he's like, I'm going to be honest, I don't know. We're trying to figure that out. They're in combat here, but I can't tell you. We've got units mixed up everywhere. They're like, oh, well, you can't command your troops. You're not an efficient commander. And this all comes up to Pershing, and he's getting more and more ticked off at Edwards. But when you look at the division's performance compared to all the other divisions, you're like, oh, it's the same thing. The 2nd Division, one could argue, was even worse at Bellawood. The performance of the Marines, while very, very brave, was utterly just an absolute waste, an incredible waste. And then the 42nd Division, when they replace the 26th Division and attack Croix Rouge Farm, are going to take 1,000. MacArthur's going to take 1,000 casualties in his brigade on the first day. It's every single division has to just go through this bloodletting. Some of them learn, some don't, like the 2nd Division, because they're going to do the same thing again. But yeah, it is really it's really expensive learning curve. So what this does for the 26th Division, at least, there's a whole bunch of officers who realize we can't fight this type of war. We need to fight like the French are fighting. We need to be using infiltration tactics. Or there was a great memo from inside the division with this idea of combat gangs.
Okay.
It's essentially just a combined arms platoon is all it is. It's super cool because it's showing that there's tactical innovation happening inside, in the unit level, and then rising up to the top. So what these leaders are understanding is they need to adapt and change the way that they fight because they can't take casualties like this in the future. I mean, it's absolutely it's horrific what happens to these units at Second Marne.
Wow, And we still, like that, that battle is typically seen as the major turning point in that summer of 1980. So again, like you're saying earlier, and in spite of everything we did, we still wind up winning the battle, and pushing the enemy back, and being able to take the initiative.
Right. And that's sort of the problem, though, is like we look at this and we go, hey, yay, we won. And you're like, if we took losses like that today, the country would shut down.
Right.
July 18th to 20th is still like, for Maine, they're like the three bloodiest days in Maine history, bar the Civil War, maybe.
Really?
And probably even more than that. It's awful. I mean, you have whole sets of brothers and cousins and friends, like from all these really small towns across New England, who are just gone in a matter of 3 days. 18 to 20 is that's where, at least for the 103rd, that's where they take most of their casualties. Now, a lot of the 101st, 102nd, 104th, they get theirs the next few days, which are equally bloody and confusing. So, and so we go, oh, look at all the success, but at what cost? And for the 26th Division, the cost is even greater because, and I don't know the root of this, and I would love to, I keep looking to find out why, but as Mark Grotelschuhen points out in his book on the AAF Way of War, for whatever reason, the 26th Division received far, far fewer replacements than any other AAF division, despite them being one of the four OGs, really, in the AAF. Despite them having that much combat time, they get major replacements only in August. That's it. They are never at full strength during the war because they barely even recoup their battle losses, if that. So every time they go into action, they're significantly under strength, and that's just going to get worse and worse as we proceed towards October.
Wow, that's interesting. Like there's obviously, there must be a reason. Like everybody, like the 77th Division was bled out on the Vel in August of 1918, and then in September, right before the Meuse-Argonne began, they received a huge influx of brand new replacements, most of whom probably died within the next 3-4 days.
Right, around Montfaucon, yeah.
But they got that, and so they knew, they would have known, like, hey, the 26th is hurting as well. So
yeah, and it's I don't know if it's I can, as much as, so I have a personal dislike for Pershing, but I could even with that, I still could not see him go, oh, we're not going to give the 26th any more troops. Like that just seems like the most callous. So I still am trying to figure it out, but the numbers remain that they receive significantly less than all the other, the 1st, 2nd, 32nd, 28th, 42nd. These units have been fighting for a while. They just receive significantly fewer. And that is, so by the time that they are looking at Saint-Mihiel, Meuse-Argonne, you're looking around, but by around Saint-Mihiel, you're around like 75% strength, maybe.
Wow.
If you're lucky.
Wow. And that matters, especially taking losses of the kinds that they were going to take at Meuse-Argonne and had taken in Second Marne.
It's a psychological thing too, especially for these Guard units who, there's that close hometown community connection. And then all of a sudden those people that whether you'd joined the Guard in, as a young kid, and these are like the guys that you've known forever, or even if you joined in 1917, you probably still knew them, like in the town or in the community. So all of a sudden those faces are missing, and you've got these new guys, like transfers from other units or brand new raw recruits that you're trying to figure out, and there's just never enough of them.
They get, like you said, a short break in August, and then Saint-Mihiel, they help clear the Saint-Mihiel salient on September 12th and 13th of 1918. And then, the Meuse-Argonne begins, and I believe the 26th was holding the line at the base of what used to be the Saint-Mihiel salient. And then in October, they get called up to the Meuse front, and they take on the eastern bank of the Meuse River, the Meuse Heights. And in the podcast, I'm almost at the point where can start talking about them. I'm not quite there yet. So hopefully another month or so. But they're coming in pretty late in the game. But now the 26 is coming into the line, and they are a pretty experienced AEF division. And for this question here, I'm sorry I left it kind of vague, but what I meant was at the end of the operation, at the end of the Meuse-Argonne, Captain Sherman Shumway, commander of the 2nd Battalion, 103rd Infantry, said when asked how he used his movement, when asked how he moved his unit so quickly, he replied, the experience of Chateau Thierry back during the summer. So how did the 103rd apply those expensive lessons learned before the Samuel operation?
Yeah, so one, it helps that you have a 13-hour artillery bombardment preceding you. That's always good. But what really happens is you have, instead of wave infantry attacks, you have basically squad and platoon level infiltrations. So if you're moving, identify machine gun, automatically everyone just goes to providing as much suppressive fire as possible, utilizing attached. If you they had usually I think two. The 103rd Machine Gun Battalion provided detachments of Hotchkiss guns, and so you utilize, if you've got machine guns, if you've got the 37 millimeter, the 1-pounder guns,
right?
They were bringing those things right up to the front, and using those against machine gun positions. So basically, instead of like just advancing until you all die, it's you hit that, you immediately suppress, and then try to flank or destroy it with artillery, trench mortars, 37 millimeter. Fix and flank. It's like what we do today. So that was the thing that was most fascinating for me, is realizing these guys automatically were like, okay, no, that was a very bad way. We all knew it was a bad way. We were doing what we were taught. It was a terrible idea. We need to do what makes sense. And it works very, very, very well. I mean, to the point where you've got flank units of the attacking, the 103rd was attacking on a 1 battalion front. They start sending teams out to help the units on their flanks. So you are also seeing liaison actually happening, which is super cool, because they're learning, no, we have to like work in close coordination with the units on our right and left. That's how we survive. No one wants to go pull a lost battalion. Granted, this is before the lost battalion, but they're still thinking like, no, flank security is really, really important. And they just gradually work their way through these trenches, incredibly successful. I mean, they capture 900 prisoners. 1 battalion, Shumway captures Captain Shumway, commanding a battalion. He's like 24 years old. He's right? A kid. He's just a kid. And they capture an entire German battalion, basically, in their assembly area. And the German battalion commander doesn't want to surrender, because the German battalion commander is a count, like in the peerage, and he has to surrender to this kid from Bangor, Maine. And this is a humorous moment where he's like, I request a car for my effects. And then a doughboy like gives him a little poke in the back of the bayonet, and he's like, here's your car, start walking.
I was going to say like, do you now,
Yeah. So it's just very, very effective use of all the enablers inside the regiment. And that was a huge lesson that they learned from 2nd Marne. And then taking it slowly, using a deliberate approach to fix and flank repeatedly worked very, very well. So in the process, they captured dozens of machine guns. I think overall, actually, around 1,200 prisoners, and they make their breakthrough. So they've learned how to do this now. Now they just kind of have to survive, because while they don't take that many casualties, they're still significantly under strength, and they're not going to get any more replacements. Pretty much at all. Man.
So they go into the Meuse-Argonne. Now we know under strength, fairly under strength, experienced, but with a lot of gaps in the line. So what was the 103rd what was the 103rd Infantry's experience in the Meuse Heights in late October? Like, what was the state of the German forces opposite them? Still providing like determined defense, or steadily falling back?
Still very much providing a determined defense. When you look at the table of organizations for the German divisions that the 26th is encountering, the thing that stands out the most is the absurd amount of machine guns. These are just they're defensive divisions, essentially. They're designed for this. So when the 26th Division goes into the heights of the Meuse, just like 4 or 5 kilometers north of where the ossuary is today. So for one, that area, obviously, like, it's Verdun. It's the Verdun front. So it looks like hell, actually. And that's how people describe it. Like, one guy's like, I have no words to describe the conditions that we're living in now. There's just detritus of war everywhere, bits of humans everywhere. It is horrific. It is also, October and November, the flu, Spanish influenza is beginning to hit, and just regular sickness is hitting because it's raining, it's cold, it's very hard to get food up to the lines, and the Germans are using persistent chemical agents pretty much regularly. So you're spending a lot of time, if you're on the front lines or even the rear areas, you're spending a lot of time all masked up.
Yeah.
That really wears you down. The 26th Division conducts its last really major offensive towards the end of October to take the Bellebois and around the Bois de Haumont, and it's just a couple hills filled with concrete bunkers and all that sort of fun things that the Germans do for defense.
Yeah.
And they take it, they lose it, they take it, they lose it. I think about 3 times. So tanks that are supposed to be supporting them have a very hard time in that terrain because it's crap. It's really, really difficult for tanks to move, light tanks. And they're really unable to make any significant gains in that offensive. The problem is, one reason they can't make many gains is because, like I said, they're around 70% strength when they go in, maybe if you're lucky. By the time most of the division comes out of that, you're looking at like 20 to 30% strength. The 101st Infantry is almost completely shattered in the 26 at the end of these 3 days of fighting at the end of October. And there are recommendations of like, pull this unit off the line before it breaks.
Wow.
So the 103rd is actually one of the better places, one of the better manned regiments in the division, because they didn't have, it was mainly the 51st Brigade, so the 101st and 102nd that were bearing the brunt of this fighting, and some of the 104th as well. So they're just basically occupying these frontline sectors now, just trying to keep steady pressure on the Germans. On November 8th, they see that some of the Germans in front of them are beginning to pull back. And so patrols go out, identify, yep, they're falling back. The whole division begins to push forward. And they're running into essentially what the regimental commander calls a checkerboard of machine guns. And it's rotten because each company is around, let's see, I think the last November 10th, the last companies that are attacking, you're around like 20 to 25 guys.
Out of an original complement of 250. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So yeah, you're looking at around like 10%, actually, realistically. So, and once again, they're just small unit actions, moving forward, moving with squads. There's a whole other wrinkle here too, because also around November 8th, Colonel Hume gets relieved of command. Well, it's not just him. There's multiple leaders inside the 26th Division. Edwards got relieved on November 3rd.
Right.
Ostensibly told to go back and, you need to go and build a new division in the U.S. But it was a buildup of a lot of that distrust that we'd sort of seen coming. Now, Hume's relief was weird because he and a couple other leaders got relieved because of charges of fraternization. Basically,
Right.
that the regiment wasn't being aggressive enough, and that they sort of had a truce with the Germans to like not shoot at each other. And it's really interesting because you'll see some people take the statement at face value. I started digging into the regiment's records, and they've got the depositions of all the officers because there was an inquiry. And you've got like literally everybody being like, no, there's like the regimental chaplain as well is like,
right.
There's no fraternization. There's attempts to get them to surrender, and some of them did. Anytime that there was sort of a back and forth, it was basically like Germans were like, hey, you want to not shoot at each other? And like, would you guys like to just, stop shooting for good and come on back and be prisoners? And the Germans, when they didn't want to do that, then, the shooting continued. Sure. So for all those reasons, Hume gets relieved, and this guy who had been the division judge advocate takes command. And it's really, really interesting in these crucial last 3 days of fighting with the 103rd, when you're talking units, battalions down to like 200 guys that started out at 1,200, involved in this really, really nasty fighting in horrible terrain, in horrible weather, against very, very well dug in Germans who are mostly machine guns. And so you've got the regimental commander who's just like, no, attack, 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 like keep pressing. All we need is it's like one more good push and they'll break. And I'm like, oh my God, where have I heard that before? Every single war, one more good push. And what was really interesting is he was like, keep pressing forward he specifically says, without regard to the units on your right and left.
Oh, that.
And like I was reading this in the National Archives, like his orders. I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, so you're just like begging for another lost battalion here, are you?
Right. I was going to say that's the line that got the lost battalion in trouble.
Right. And this is like November 9th. I mean, we've only got a few days of this thing left. And what's fascinating is, so the battalion commanders are guys who were company grades or even enlisted, like when the war began. And they are very battle hardened. Like they are some of the very best. Like you've got Cabot, you've got Doan, and you have Shumway. Some really, really, really good combat leaders. And they're like, yeah, we're not actually going to listen to you. In fact, like some of the field messages that go back to regimental headquarters are basically like, I want this in writing, because this is like, you're basically trying to, put a death sentence on my battalion.
Right.
And so they say, okay, yeah, Roger, we'll go do that. So in the last attacks, they're held up around the Bois de Vie, which is just a hilltop with some shattered sort of woods around it, with a whole massive trench system that I got to go into a couple of weeks ago, which was super cool, but still exists. Very large trench system.
Isn't it crazy? Like we can get to that in a minute, but like.
So, and what they do is really interesting. Under strength, they could have just been like, screw this guy. We're staying in our foxholes and not moving. But they continuously are making efforts to move forward. So they hit the Bois de Vie. One battalion takes over the front line. And yeah, the orders were, don't worry about your flanks. And so that battalion commander goes to one of the other battalion commanders. He's like, hey man, we'll help. And so what they end up doing is, I think it was, 1st Battalion. So third battalion was the assault element. And then they take the 1st Battalion, take 2 companies and put them on the flanks, basically hey, make sure that we're connected to somebody. Make sure we don't advance ahead of everybody else. So you have this communication already happening. Like, this is organic. These are people who know what they're doing. They're really good at this by now. There's a few, they try to, they request artillery on the hilltop. It's like 15 to 18 rounds, and like, oh my God, like this is nothing. Like they try to hit it with trench mortars, but they're realizing it's not going anywhere, and they're taking too many losses. So November 10th, the last attack of the day, Company K basically finds this ravine in between these 2 hilltops, and they infiltrate into the ravine. Again, it's like 22 dudes. That's about it. Wow. Infiltrate into the ravine, go up the slope, and the platoon leader, company commander, squad leader. Yeah, all of these things.
Yeah.
He's an LT, and he's just like, hey, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna basically do walking fire. So like, just shoot. Like, I don't care if you see something where it looks like someone could be hiding, shoot it.
Wow.
It's that concept of walking fire. And so they move up, and yeah, they get into the whole trench system, and they start cleaning it out. And the rest of the battalion's able to come in, all 150, 200 of them, and like slowly begin clearing out like this massive, intricate, like 3 or 4 lines of entrenchments that are holding something like 50 or 60 Germans with multiple machine guns. So, and it's pretty brutal fighting. There's Lieutenant Pert in Company I think, who had literally, he and a sergeant had just hopped into a trench and like bayoneted and shot the German machine gunners and like put in the front line trench, and were able to take this area. He's behind a tree, and he's like writing a note to his battalion commander to give him location of other machine guns. Like, here's where I'm taking fire from. Can we get artillery? And as he's writing it, he gets shot through the head.
Man, wow.
So it's really savage. This is where Moses Neptune, who was one of the Passamaquoddy Native Americans,
right,
in the regiment, he was actually the chief's son, and he's killed here. And another one of the Passamaquoddy men is shot through the legs while carrying another soldier off the battlefield. So it's nasty. It is nasty, close-in fighting. Gets in hand to hand, but they do it. And the amazing thing is they break this line, and they are the only effective force of the 26th Division left on November 10th. Like, they actually have to extend their line on the night of November 10th to put all 3 battalions online for the first time in the war, to go cover down into the 51st Brigade sector, because like the 101st and 102nd pretty much don't exist anymore. They're just, there's not much left of them. So, and then of course, the morning comes the famous order of, you're going to still keep attacking on November 11th. And it comes in like, even the new regimental commander, Colonel Dowell, Cassius Dowell, he gets the order, and he's like, it was in a testimony before Congress after the war, because Congress was like, why were these attacks made? And he goes, I hope that my military discipline will never be tested again like this. Because it was, orders came in at 9:30. Well, the orders came in the morning, during the night, everyone's going to attack. Orders came in at 9:30 saying, nope, the infantry will not advance, just the artillery will fire until 11 o'clock. And then like 10 or so, another order comes in that says, order the infantry to advance and halt at 11, holding all ground gained.
Man, yeah.
And that's where you get their last casualty is Corporal Leon LeBonville from Colonel Hume's old company from Holton, Maine, who's this guy who's been in he was a pre-war guardsman, made it through the entire war, killed in that last, just coming out of the woods in that last push. And they were able to just kind of like straighten out a little bit of a line. But yeah, that's by the time the armistice, by 11, there was zero celebration. These guys were just completely in. They'd been on the front lines pretty much since they arrived in the heights of the Meuse, since the end of October. So you got 2 weeks of just like utter crap.
Right.
So yeah, they were pretty much, everyone just like collapses to sleep or like tries to find something to eat, but no celebration.
Yeah. One of the lines in the book is, everything goes quiet, and I guess a doughboy is like, well, I guess I'll go find some grub.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly.
But nature, nature calls, like, intake at that point,
Yeah. I mean, what else are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, real quick, like a little bit off topic, but like, so you were there like, just a few weeks ago. So, you were in the very ground that the 103rd was fighting, like the Bois de Ville is
the Bois de Ville. Yeah, it was super awesome. We're able to link up with a friend who's a gendarme to ensure that we're not wandering into some farmer's field or get shot by French hunters.
Yeah,
which is an occupational hazard. There's lots of hunting in that area. Yeah, no, it was a hunch. I was like, I've never been here, but I think there should be something here. And so we took Lieutenant Blackman's flanking route down to the ravine, which is decently clear. And then at just one point, I'm just like, right, let's just go up the hill. And so we were just walking up the hill, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't see anything. Like, is this going to be a complete dead end? Did I drag my friends here out of like, we could go see cool stuff that we know exists, and instead we're just wandering around some French woods. And then we hit the barbed wire, and I'm like, oh, barbed wire.
Wow.
Like an actual post there with a barbed wire. I'm like, so I'm like freaking out about that. Meanwhile, other people are going up the top of the hill, and I hear, holy, like, some joyful swearing. And I get up there, and like my mind just like blows, because it's like, sometimes when you look at a World War I trench, or a trench anywhere, and you're like, this could be a trench line, or this could be like irrigation, or it could have just rained a lot, patterns of a stream or something.
Right.
This was one of those like, oh my God, it's a full three line trench system with fire trenches and communication, like everything all there, that is visible. And you're like, what? Oh my God, like this is it. So yeah, we walked around and started finding like all the great stuff that we always look for on battlefields, like
rusty gold, as my friend calls it.
Yep, tons of like shell fragments and some shot rounds, cartridges, some elements, like bully beef tins, and yeah. So just like, not only is this the spot, but like here's actual evidence of like them being U.S. soldiers being here. So that was absolutely the coolest. So like just walking all the lines and really like it's a huge area. And it was then that I suddenly realized, I was like, how the hell did like about 150 dudes take this? I'm like malnourished, exhausted guys at the edge of their limits took this. And like my mind just like broke. I'm like, I can't even fathom that. Like if someone had given me that mission, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. I'm not doing this. Like this is an unlawful order.
Yeah, or we can do it in like 3 days, but I need hot chow and a couple of days of sleep. Like,
yep. I'm going to need basically as much artillery that you can imagine right now.
Yeah. Everything you launched on September 26th, I need all of that.
Yeah, I need all of that. Yeah. So I need the $1 million barrage. It was utterly wild, and it brought a whole new respect for me. It brought a whole new respect to those individuals who were able to accomplish that, especially knowing, as many of them did at that point, that the war was really about to end. To just keep going was utterly unreal, and it also helped me like understand. They're only at the 26th Division is only on the Meuse sector, October, like mid-October. They're not there for very long, but I think the time there left a really indelible mark, just as the Second Marne did. But it's a mark that less people were willing to write about, because I think it really was so horrific that they were just like, I don't want to think about this. Like, I don't want to remember it. I don't want to think about it.
Right.
So it was fascinating to see that whole perspective, and see that the terrain is awful. The terrain is so bad. We definitely almost totally tore the bottom off the car taking one road that we probably shouldn't have taken. But GPS said it was the most direct route.
I know. I know. I don't know if you've been to the it's on the other side, the Joseph Gunter Memorial. It's up on the hill point. It's like the furthest penetration by the AEF, in the 29th Division. It's not where Gunter died.
Yeah.
Henry Gunter, I'm sorry. It's not where he died, but the memorial to him is there. And it's this big hill, and I was there in just an SUV, and it said like, just take this hill, just turn right and go down. But the slope was like this, and I was like, man, I'm gonna do this really slow, and if something goes wrong, it's gonna be hours.
Right.
sees the
Right.
smoke, on the hill.
Right.
So, yeah, that ground is something. But it's fascinating. I'm so glad you guys got really into it and got to see the marks that are left there. That out there, the war is still like a big thing. Like it's a palpable presence. Maybe that's just me going into it already thinking that, but I like every.
Oh no, it's literally. We started out in the in Haumont, which is one of the destroyed villages that hasn't been rebuilt. We actually get to meet the mayor of Haumont because all these destroyed villages still have a mayor.
Amazing.
So he wanted to come out and see what these crazy Americans are doing. But yeah, I mean the war is so very visible, and I don't know. I left Verdun just feeling in a way that I don't think I really had felt on any other battlefield in World War I. Where, because sometimes you're just like, I don't, it's hard to imagine the fighting here. I felt a lot of it around Bellow because just of so much of the research into the soldiers and everything, and you can kind of visualize things. But there, you're like, you can see it, man. It is just a stunning place. And then when you drive up to like the cemetery, look at like 16,000 graves look like,
Right.
in a landscape that's still just pockmarked with shell holes. I think everyone needs to go to Verdun. If you go to France, you should go to Verdun. It will leave you a changed person. And you're probably not going to be a very like war is cool person. Hopefully. If you leave feeling like war is cool after seeing Verdun, maybe talk to a therapist.
Yeah, definitely. The ossuary is very, very sobering. The 15,000 graves in front, and then when you walk around back of the actual building itself, you can see the bones collected from the battlefield. It's all very sobering. But the Meuse-Argonne too is, I always try to describe it as a garden of peace, very expensively purchased. It's one of the most stunning places. The level of care that goes into it, and Bruce Malone and Charlie Diaz, like you guys are knocking it out. But it's, you think of like, man, there's a lot of boys under there and all over the period of 47 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really moving to when we went from, we went and stopped by I think it was the day after, or maybe it was that day. I can't. Anyway, a couple of days after we did go to the Meuse-Argonne cemetery, and then I got to go find the soldiers who died taking the Bois de Vie, and go like visit their graves, which also is a whole extra level of meaning. The ones whose remains were not repatriated by their families. That whole region is, I don't know, there's just something you feel heavy when you're there. It's not a light, happy feeling.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm happy to hear this because I thought I was like the only one.
No, I was just like, every time I go, I'm like, man, I'm just such a downer here, but it just feels somber. And I don't know if it's like the feeling of just a lot of death, not just from the Americans, but also, I mean, obviously the Verdun is just a French sacred space, precisely because of the sacrifices that were made there. But yeah, that whole region just left me feeling very thoughtful afterwards. And I think I'm still trying to figure out, like, to put into words, like, how do I feel about this? Like, what does it make me feel? And that's kind of that's the purpose of going to a lot of these battlefields, right? Is to, yes, you want to you can look at lessons learned, you can look at terrain to see how that affected operations. You can look at tactics, you can look at individual stories. But I think when you start to really walk through a lot of these areas, you get really just hit with the power of meaning. Like, what does this mean? Like, what was this for? Which is really interesting. I went to the World War I monument in DC the other day. And on the back of it's my favorite part because there's this quote that's basically, I'm trying to remember the exact words, but it's like, we went and did our part. It is up to you to provide us meaning. Like, you determine, what did our deaths mean? Like, what did our service mean? What did our sacrifice mean? I was like, oh yeah, that hits. Like that's
very profound.
And it sort of speaks to like what do we do as historians? Are we providing that meaning, or are we just getting lost in like the little, like, I don't want to sound demeaning or patronizing, but like you get, some people can get so worked up in like the tactics or the equipment or the weapons that sometimes it just feels like you can't see the meaning aspect of it. Like what did this war mean for America? What did this war mean for these communities? What did this war mean for the survivors of it, who had to come home and then live with these memories for the rest of their life? And then also watch, not only that, but like something that should probably feel pretty familiar to lots of combat veterans today. Hey, you went and did this thing and you sacrificed a lot. And then there was an even bigger war. Like, and then war happened again. Like,
yeah, yes.
So what was it for? And I think there's a lot to be said of looking at the World War I generation from the global war on terror, like our generation, of like, how do we heal? And I think talking about World War I is a really good way to actually help that, to show, hey, you're not alone. We are not the only generation that can't look back at a war and be like, yeah, we did it. Awesome. Right. Like, mission accomplished.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Especially when Foch says, you don't have peace. You've got a 20-year armistice here.
Yep.
Yeah. That back of the quote on the back of the DC Memorial, that makes me think of in Flanders Fields, the poem, yeah. To you we throw the torch. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That same line of thought. Amazing. Jonathan, where can people find your book? Because while you can buy it on Amazon, you can also get it for free. And I don't think you'll mind my saying that.
Not at all. I want people to do that because, yes, while you can buy it for $20 on Amazon, that is by virtue of the fun fact that government publications have no copyright. And so print for fee services like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a couple others, basically can just take the entire, and can do take the entire catalog of basically the government printing office and sell it. So don't do that. Go to Army University Press. They are the publisher. You can go to the books section, look at World War I. Last time I checked, I was right next to Infantry in Battle by Marshall, which I feel like I was like, I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to be next to George C. Marshall.
Well, if I can, yes, you do, because I wanted to say, so your book, while I was reading it, I said, how am I going to describe this book to him? So bear me out. So for the last couple of years, my wife has made a British style Christmas cake, like it's kind of like a fruit cake, but it's soaked in brandy.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay, so Jonathan's book is like a Christmas cake. Like, it's dense, I don't know if it's soaked in brandy.
Some of it was soaked in gin, but yeah.
Just makes it even better. But it is a, like, and I say that because it's dense, it's rich, but it's so incredibly informative. And as far as a book, like, I read it cover to cover, and I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed getting down and learning about these communities, which are just up the road from me, that even I know very little about. So you very much deserve to be next to Marshall. Nice job.
Thank you so much. That means the world. Like I said, I never meant to set out to write this. It was, after a while, you can only collect so many stories before you're like, well, these are not my stories. I need to share these. And after a while, it just became like this imperative thing of like, I need to share these stories. There are so many amazing individuals, communities, all these different things. And so it worked really well with Army University Press, because they were looking at, showing from the professional side, like, how do you how do you incorporate the reserve component into large-scale combat operations? How do you train? How do you fight? What are the lessons learned from that fighting? How do you recover from these types of losses? So I was able to blend. My goal was to blend the personal side, the stories, that people can connect with that professional learning aspect of here's how the AEF was a learning organization. Here's how it learned to fight successfully or not, as the case may be. And here's sort of the things that we can take away from it. And here's how it's impacted the way that the Army has developed today. So it was really just me going, I need to tell these stories, especially when one specific dude wouldn't leave me alone, even though he's obviously long dead. But so the last company I commanded was the 251st Engineer Company, which was Company D, 103rd Infantry from Norway, Maine.
Really? Okay.
So the guy who had been the company commander, basically I had historical like run-ins with him, like from 2016 until the book was published. Like real, just like weird, bizarre, almost like borderline creepy, like, here's this photo that I helped identify. Oh, that's him. He had the very unfortunate name of Guy Sweat.
Wow. Yes. All right.
Very memorable. I did this photo of him, and then there's this a thing. Oh, his name was on the wall in the Chemin des Dames, like in a quarry on the Chemin des Dames. I got a bunch of letters donated from him. And then the big one, the one that was just basically like hey, tell my story, was the state historian called me and was like, hey, one of my guys who does estate sales, he found this book that was sitting basically on a trash heap of things to get thrown away. And he opened it up and leafed through it. And it's the diary of a World War I soldier.
Oh my God.
And his name was Guy Sweat. Would you be interested? I'm like, oh my God, like, are you kidding me? It was his full, like he kept full every day, all of his notes. So it was things like that. And I got really lucky because National Archives is obviously amazing and wonderful. Pro tip for all of you who are doing research on World War I units, in Record Group 111, yes, you have all the divisional files and subordinate units will be in there. The other place to look is records of mobile. I think it's called Records of Mobile Army Units. I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
There is an obscene amount of stuff on units in there because I think I had like 4 boxes on the 103rd inside the 26th Division. There were 22 boxes in this other records group.
Whoa! Wow!
It was insane, and that's where like field messages, like all this little like the gold, the gold that researchers are looking at. So if you're doing research, go to NARA, look at that. The researchers will be very helpful if you sort of stutter and be like, hey, here's what I think it's called, or you can look it up. Somewhere I've got the record group number written down, but
sure.
That was amazing. And then also I just lucked out by families when they heard about that there was someone who was researching this. I mean, I had company commanders' logbooks, I had battalion commanders' logbooks, I had diaries, I had all the letters of a battalion commander. Yeah, it adds up after a while. So I had some really good source material.
Oh, fantastic. Now, final question, and I'll let you go. Future projects? Going to the Civil War interest or work on Guy Sweat in World War I? Like,
oh, that's a great question. After I finished this in, so let's see, I finished this in 2020. Great year. I literally, when I was at NARA in March of 2020, like I was closing out my last day and they're like, oh, you had really good timing. We're shutting down and we don't know when we're opening back up because COVID.
Yeah.
So it was literally nick of time. So it came out in ebook and then printed book form later in 2021. And after the whole process, I was like, I am never writing a book again. Never again. Am I editing? formatting, answering questions about maps, like all these little things. Like, I'm never doing this again. And now I'm like, I should write a book. So I mean, the short answer is I don't know.
Sure.
I would love to look at the 103rd in World War II because they were in the Pacific with the 43rd Infantry Division. So they've got some crazy stuff there. Or possibly also looking into the Civil War or also the American Revolution. So, could literally be anywhere. So all my side projects right now are mainly just articles and things like that. So we will see what the future holds.
Oh, fantastic. Jonathan, thank you again so much for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to come on and talk about your book. And any other World War I related topics, the door is always open. So really thank you. Greatly appreciated. And what a great discussion. And good to talk about our people here, the New Englanders.
That's right.
So
yeah, no, thank you so much. This is a blast. I loved it.